Hi, I'm Charlie Starr. The video you are about to watch is part of my free course, How to Read a Birth Chart. Signing up is easy. Simply subscribe to my channel, turn on the notification bell, and shoot me an email to the address in the description box below, letting me know you want to be enrolled. I will reply with a welcome email, including the syllabus and other free course materials. Then head on over to my channel page and find the How to Read a Birth Chart free course playlist. Hit play and follow the step-by-step instructions to become a true birth chart master. And now, back to this video. Hey guys, so in this video we're going to be talking about the history of the birth chart, particularly Western tropical whole sign astrology, and the origin of the birth chart as part of the series of How to Read a Birth Chart. So we're learning how to read a birth chart, but we just want to have a little bit of a foundational understanding of how we got the techniques and the symbolism that we have now and the techniques that are going to be covered in this course. Where do they come from? That's what this video is going to give us, a little bit of a history, a little bit of a context. So most of the information that we have and most of the techniques that we use today originate from the Hellenistic period. So what is the Hellenistic period? The Hellenistic period refers to a time from, I believe, 325 BC to 30 BC. What shaped this period was Alexander the Great, the king of Macedonia, had a conquest where he conquered many of the Mediterranean countries and unified them, and then in 325 he died. Before he died, he established a port called Alexandria in Egypt. At this port, he had a library, and when ships would come in to trade and do commerce with Egypt, they would ask the people on the ship if they had any books. And if they had any books, they would take the books. I think this might have even been law that they had to do this. I'm not sure, but I think I remember learning that it was. They would take the books that the people from the ships had, they would take them to the library in Alexandria, and they would hand copy them so that they had them in their library, and then they would return the books to their owners. So in this way, Alexandria became probably the biggest historical library that we know of. With this era that really valued not only documenting things, but learning things from a variety of different cultures. And so because of this, a lot of astrology was able to come out of the closet, since we do have astrology that exists way before that. But two things were happening. One was that astrology was essentially given like a safe space to like flourish. It was also given attention and importance, and given like the opportunity to write those things down. So those were kind of like two things that allowed astrology to like not only grow, but also like be documented for us to use later. Writers from the Hellenistic period would be Valens, Thrasymachus, and Ptolemy, to name just a few. There's a lot of astrological writers from the Hellenistic period, but those were three of the big ones. And a lot of the writers from the Hellenistic period, they actually attributed everything that they knew to the Egyptian god Thoth, who was also known as the spirit of Hermes Trismegistus. So this gets to be a little controversial because Thoth was a pharaoh in Egypt, but he was, like all of pharaohs in Egypt, elevated to deity status. But on top of that, legend had it that he lived up to 52,000 years ago. So this is where it can get controversial. This is where we can only speculate to a degree about where astrology really came from, because the sources from the Hellenistic period do attribute their writings to Thoth and to Thoth's the legend with Thoth was that Thoth actually lived in Atlantis, and then when Atlantis crumbled and fell beneath the ocean, then Thoth immigrated to Egypt, where he became a pharaoh and created writing and so many other stories about Thoth. But he also became to be associated with the Greek god Hermes, who had to do with writing and communication. And we do have a whole bunch of texts that come from Thoth, such as the Enroll tablets, the Hermetica, and a number of others. Other theories put forward that Thoth was one of a number of aliens that landed in Egypt and gave information and teachings to the Egyptian people, which was how they got to be such a highly civilized and prosperous country so long ago, and how they created all of their pyramids and also all of the mysteries and writings and belief systems that the Egyptians have, which is very fascinating to many people. All of astrology really goes back to this legacy, this lineage. So, some people will say that essentially the birth chart and the tropical Western astrology that we have today was invented in the Hellenistic period and was just attributed to Thoth and to Hermes as a sort of religious formality. Or you could say that these writings, we actually had these writings written down and we lost those original texts. Or you could say that, the spirit of Thoth, the spirit of Hermes, spoke to these astrologers through divination, and so they did get that information from Thoth, Hermes Trismegistus, in that way. So you have a couple different theories that are out there about the exact origins, but I will let you decide for yourself, because there really isn't a way that I could prove one way or the other to you. I will say that if you're interested in Thoth, there is a lot of legend out there about Thoth. There's a lot of lore about Hermes Trismegistus and the secret societies, Hermeticism, the Hermetica, the 7 principles. It's literally everywhere if you start to look for it. So moving forward from that space, I will say that astrology did exist in Mesopotamia, in Babylon, in there's so much more that I could say about astrology, but I'm trying to keep it to the birth chart. So before the Hellenistic period, we do have evidence of the zodiac wheel, the constellations. Babylon, I believe, is the earliest reference that we found that talks about the different constellations on the zodiac belt, and there's imagery that we found of it. There's omens of full moons and things like that we found in caves in Mesopotamia. So astrology can go even further back, but the reason mainly why I'm bringing it back to the Hellenistic period is because that is the time when the birth chart became especially widely known and studied. Okay, so moving on from there, we have Emperor Constantine, who's a Christian emperor who conquered Egypt in 30 BCE and spread Christianity, and essentially that marks the end of the Hellenistic period. So from there, there's a lot of information that we don't know about astrology. And then in the Middle Ages, again, there's a lot that we don't have about the Middle Ages, but it does look like from the sources we do have that astrology did become popular again in the Middle Ages, and a lot of lords and rulers in the Middle Ages would have astrological consults advising them. Moving on from that period, bringing us into the 7th century. So in the 7th century, we have the Age of Reason, and in the Age of Reason, astrology and astronomy went their separate ways. So before that, astrology and astronomy were considered part of the same field of study, and at that point, they were split into astrology over here, astronomy over here. And then astronomy became very credible, whereas astrology became known as a pseudoscience. and it really wasn't perceived as rational or of adding any value other than superstition. So then what happened was, fast forward some more, we have Christian astrology published by William Lilly in Europe, and it kind of like repopularizes astrology. But also shortly thereafter, we have Carl Jung, who was like this, leading psychologist who only lived recently. But he did so much to bring psychology to the forefront of the United States and Europe. And because he used astrology and the birth chart to study the psychology of his patients, his clients, then astrology had a resurgence of popularity, sort of like a revival, so to speak, in the United States, of becoming less of like a occultist, superstitious, evil reputation, and more of like what we know today of like sun sign astrology, the horoscopes, the pop astrology, because astrology essentially began to be interpreted from like a psychological perspective thanks to Carl Jung. So that is still the popular way to use astrology today, but there's other ways that you can interpret astrology, which we'll get into in the next video. But I do think that's a good little like summary of how we got the birth chart as we know it today, Western tropical whole sign astrology in the United States. Okay, and that includes our brief, very, very brief summary of the history of the birth chart. In the next video, we'll get into answering the question, what kind of information can I receive from a birth chart? Like, what kind of information can I expect to know from reading my birth chart? If you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe so that it triggers the YouTube algorithm to share this YouTube video with more people so that more people can learn about astrology.